Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat.
And a very good evening to you and a warm welcome to Newsline Live. Now then, the question really is the rule of law gaining ground or needs tweaking? Let's find out how well this one country, one law business is doing, shall we? We're delighted to have the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, President's Council, Saliya Peiris. Very good evening to you and welcome to Newsline.
Thank you. Good evening.
And so let's pose the question to you. The rule of law in Sri Lanka, is it gaining ground or does it need some tweaking?
Well, that's a difficult question to answer, but I would think that it needs tweaking, or shall we say, you always have to pay attention to ensure that it's preserved.
Right.
And not only in Sri Lanka, but for that matter in any country.
All over the world.
That is so.
In the recent past, after all these peaceful protests, and some of it later became not so peaceful, but during this time, the Bar Association appeared to be at the forefront of matters. And now, when I go through various posts on social media, there's a question that is being openly posed. Why has the Bar Association apparently gone to sleep? Apparently being the operative word here. Why is that? Is that true? Have you kind of decided to take a back seat, or what is the explanation?
No, the Bar Association has always stood for certain principles.
Right.
The rule of law,
Yeah.
the independence of the judiciary, the rights of people. So I think there is no question of the Bar Association will not compromise on those issues.
Right.
But if you look at, if the question you ask, and which of course I have seen on social media, is that people sometimes wonder why we have not issued statements as frequently as perhaps previously.
Yeah.
But we have brought to the notice of the authorities and to the public certain important issues which arose during the last 2 weeks. So for instance, if it relating to the incidents which happened in the early hours of the 22nd of July, where a totally disproportionate response was used to clear the presidential secretariat, and in that process people were attacked outside the secretariat, so on.
Yeah.
We issued a very strong statement on that. Then about a few days ago, we wrote to the Inspector General of Police, highlighting the need to ensure that when arrests are carried out, that the process is observed. And we brought to the notice of the Inspector General of Police the provisions in the Enforced Disappearance Act, which requires that the moment a person is arrested, he must be given the right to communicate with his relatives, with his lawyers, and there are a host of rights set out in that law, of course, which is coupled with the constitutional procedure, which sets out that arrest must be carried out in accordance with procedure established by law. We raised with the IGP the question as to how people were arrested in certain instances by persons dressed in civils, and where people were not informed of where they were being taken. And in one instance, we pointed out where the Human Rights Commission had been driven from pillar to post, and lawyers were driven from pillar to post, and for 6 hours it was not clear where this person was taken. And we warned the Inspector General of Police about relating to that. So wherever necessary for us, we make interventions. Of course, not all our interventions are necessarily on social media. So that is why I do realize that some people who are on social media
The whole time.
might think, well, that we have not issued sufficient statements for 2 weeks. But it is not the number of statements. It is when an issue arises, we have consistently maintained that position, and that position is not only what we have maintained over the last 3 months. For the last several years, we have taken up this position.
So, Mr. Peiris, is it fair to say that your IT department puts out all your statements on social media as well as the old hard copies and
Of course we do.
You do?
Yes.
Right. So what you're saying is that it isn't that you've sort of, the Bar Association, when I say you, I mean the Bar Association, hasn't taken a back seat.
No, not at all.
They are acting when a case arises.
When required, we take up positions. Of course, we do not comment on individual cases.
Right.
Because
So-
say for instance, when a person is arrested,
Yeah.
whether that arrest is legal or not,
Yeah.
we cannot necessarily comment without knowing the facts.
Right.
And as a matter of principle, we do not comment on individual cases.
Right.
But we are looking at the principles
Right.
relating to arrests, relating to the need to ensure that the rule of law is observed, that the proper process is observed, that there aren't abusers which could lead to further deterioration of the rule of law situation. We wrote to the IGP on the issue of bodies being washed ashore, and where we have asked him as to what the information is. We have expressed our concern. We expressed our concern over the spate of shootings which have occurred. So we are on the ball. We might not necessarily, everything we do is not necessarily does not come on media. There are certain steps we take which might not be seen in public.
And I think today there was another two, or yesterday there was another body.
A body was washed ashore.
Yeah.
So that we have written to the IGP and we are waiting a response.
Has he given you any response?
We have not had any response so far.
Right. So, but
this
it's
was about
very worrying that there is this sort of silence on the other side.
I think it's necessary for the authorities to inform the public as to what these are. Whether if some of these could be due to natural causes, we do not know.
We don't know.
We don't
but
know.
I mean,
but
natural causes are difficult when you find people who are bound by
that
hand.
is so. So I think it is important for the authorities to clarify what these bodies are which were washed ashore, and also to inform the public what the causes of death are and what process is being taken in respect of these investigations.
Now, we all know that the protest was largely peaceful, and at the beginning it was actually silent as well. But it kind of evolved. But then we find that some say that the Aragalia was hijacked by forces, dark forces probably, and there was no relationship to how it was at the beginning. However, it can be argued that the protesters at the beginning, certainly, the original core, they were complaining about corruption, they were complaining about mismanagement and nepotism, state-sponsored anything and everything. And so, in essence, they were complaining about the rule of law, because the law is the law is the law, and no one is above the law, including the president, as we saw when the Supreme Court suspended a presidential pardon. Now then, that's on the one side, but then you are confronted with attacks on peaceful protesters, that's one. Then we had, in sort of chronological order, then we had the occupation of state properties, we had private properties being attacked and vandalized, some burnt. So that's arson. So now we have this situation where people are saying, oh, but come on, they were just protesters. How does one balance the books?
Yes. So I think the balance is the people have a right to protest. People have a right to dissent. And that has to be respected and recognized.
Indeed.
And anyone who tries to, as Justice Mark Fernando has said in the famous Janagosha case, if you stifle peaceful protests at a particular point, there will be a violent explosion later. So that is, I think we need to understand that people have a right to dissent, to disagree, and to disagree strongly. Sometimes people in authority might not like that, but that has to be permitted. And we know that protests take various forms. It can be a silent protest, it can be a noisy protest. The Janagosha case was where people were asked to come out and make as much noise as possible. So protests can be in various forms. But of course protests necessarily have to be peaceful, non-violent, and that is where we are concerned, where the Bar Association is concerned, that has always been our position. So I think any acts of violence have to be rejected. So acts of vandalism, mischief, violence, acts of arson have to be rejected, and people who are involved in those criminal acts have to be dealt with. But you must also at the same time deal with people who attack peaceful protesters also. So the incidents of the 9th of May was sparked off by people launching an attack on innocent protesters, totally unprovoked. And we know that thereafter the consequences were very great, and it went on to it led to arson and so on. So I think it is important at this point that when you want to preserve the rule of law, you must investigate both. All acts of all criminal acts must be investigated, but there must be a sense, people must feel that the authorities are dealing with matters even-handedly. Now that is very important, because that is where, and this we have said in our public statements, I have said this to the IGP, that you must, and to the Attorney General, that the people must feel that the law, the law enforcement are fair.
So what you're saying, the optics, including the optics, they must be right.
The optics must be right. Include not only the optics,
but everything else.
Justice must be done. So there is this famous quote which says justice must not only be done, but seen to be done.
Absolutely.
And that is, I think, what is important.
And so the people of Sri Lanka are not collectively blind or deaf. And so when you say this, I just know that all these are getting on their phones, and they are now typing out the SMS to 0772 300 305, pointing out that parliamentarians damaged state property in Parliament. They damaged the Speaker's chair. Well, they put water into it, or apparently water. There were chairs broken, various books were flung, and there was complete mayhem. 4 years or 3.5 years later, we haven't seen any legal action. Now that is where the public will find it incredibly difficult to balance the books.
So I would not want to comment on a specific incident without knowing all the background facts or without knowing the stage of any investigations. And also I do not know whether some would try to argue that parliamentary privilege would apply. I do not think so.
Right.
I do not think privilege would apply.
Well, that's one hell of how do you do
that. Yeah. So that
because then we must dock their wages.
Yes.
And get them to pay for it.
Yeah, so my view is that privilege would not apply because criminal acts cannot be covered by parliamentary privilege.
Yeah.
But having said that, not only that instance, but I think the problem is when people feel that certain investigations are done at extra speed and others are done in a very lackadaisical manner. So even where arrests are concerned, if you find, once again I do not want to go into specific instances, but we say in one case you have a person who is wanted, but the police do not arrest him. He's out there, everyone knows he's out there, police do not arrest him, warrants are issued, but he's still not arrested. On the other hand, a person is taken in immediately at the dead of night, he's taken in, and maybe for relatively less serious offences, and then produced. So if the law enforcement, they are not even-handed, if there is a perception that they are not being fair, I think there will be a loss of public confidence.
Indeed, and that loss of public confidence is very evident a few years ago when there was one person, a senior officer in the military, who was wanted. and on the 4th of February, he was there, only a few seats away from the Attorney General. And it appeared that the Attorney General was, and well, the IGP would have been not too far from there as well. And this just went off, and the public can see a mismatch in these matters.
So I think this is where we need to address. We need to ensure that law enforcement are given every possible assistance, support to be independent. And they must, and you have to make the police independent. And so we know, for instance, that there have been instances of politicization within the police force, and that must be prevented. And that is where I think it is very important that the police commission be strengthened, that the appointment process, especially the appointment of officers in charge of police stations, that
it's not politicized.
It's not politicized. You ensure the right people are in place. You also have to ensure that within the police force, and this is a perennial problem, that promotions, appointments are given properly. Every year, annually, there are hundreds of police officers coming to court, filing cases relating to their promotions. And it goes on and on and on, because sometimes the promotions are arbitrary. Certain people are given promotions for political reasons, and that has to stop. So if you want to create confidence in law enforcement, you must ensure that it is depoliticized and made independent.
On that note, let's go for a quick break and take a peek at this evening's headline news from the Newsfirst Primetime News team. We'll see you on the other side of the break.
Newsfirst, Newsline with Faraz Shaukat Ali.
And welcome back to Newsline Live. We are in conversation with the President of the Bar Association of Sri Lanka, President's Council, Saliya Peiris. Mr. Peiris, thank you for the several messages. Some are still coming through. I can see the little dots going. But hopefully you're all wearing your glasses if you need to, and John typing it out. Well done. Dear Saliya Peiris, not what these bodies are, but whose bodies they are. Let's not forget they are human beings like you and I, and have the right to be identified, and we citizens have the right to know who these people were by name, not assume they were under categories as underworld or drug related. We need to know, in capitals.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that statement. The law enforcement authorities need to investigate to find out in what circumstances these bodies came to be washed ashore, who they are, their identity, and of course also the circumstances in which they have died. And that needs to be clarified. And unfortunately, in Sri Lanka, this is something which not only relates to the present time but to the past. We need a better law relating to identification, where unidentified bodies are traced. There is a gap where sometimes when bodies are found, some may be due to natural causes, some may be due to crime. There is a issue relating to identification and preservation of identity. And I think the judicial medical officers in the country have been discussing this and saying that there must be a protocol relating to this. So I absolutely agree with this, with the viewer who has sent this message, that we as citizens, we need to know in what circumstances these bodies were washed ashore. And also not only circumstances but who these people are, and of course what the cause of death is.
Indeed. So, now then, I'm going to have to amend this question slightly because it mentions names, and you've already told me that you don't want, as the Bar Association, to comment on individual cases.
That's right.
So what do you think about innocent protesters now being asked to come to the CID? Some of these people have honored their country in their chosen field, and were probably only protesting which is, of course, their constitutional right.
So, once again, if there is an allegation of a crime having been committed, I think it is within the sphere of law enforcement to investigate.
Right.
But as I said earlier, investigation, starting from the process of investigation up to prosecution, have to be objective.
Now, how objective can it be, or will it get, if we were to say to you that some people of a certain standing, I'll just say it, and if you know, even the First Lady was present at Aragalea at the time, until the President was elected. So, are we going to have a situation where the police are going to go and question the First Lady?
No, I think the police, if there is a complaint against anyone, the police are entitled to investigate.
Right.
As long as that investigation is done independently, impartially, and without any ulterior motive.
And how possible is it for the Bar Association of Sri Lanka to ask the authorities to end this witch hunt? Some people say it's witch hunt.
I think you have to take, every investigation has to be taken on the basis of the material which is available.
Right.
So, as an association, as I told you, we cannot comment on individual cases, but we will comment on the principles. The principles relating to any issue, because when it comes to a case by case, it would also depend on the material which the police have. And I think if the police say they have material, they can we cannot say they cannot investigate. We cannot say they cannot investigate, but as I said, that investigation must be fair.
Would you agree, as the President of the Bar Association and on behalf of the Bar Association, would you agree that it is unacceptable for the authorities, the police, and the investigative authorities, to act only on political directive?
Investigators should not act on political directives. I think that must be very clear, and that is what the Criminal Procedure Code says, that even the subject of arrest has to be the decision of the arresting officer, and it must be in relation to, he must have material to arrest. So, even I go far as beyond what you are saying.
Yes.
I say investigations should not be subject to any political directive. They must be politicians are not entitled to direct investigations. We must have a situation where the investigating authorities have absolute independence to investigate. If their investigation is not according to law, it should be reviewed by a court of law. But my position is there should be no political interference in any criminal investigation. I think we must strive for that.
So you back to what you said earlier, that the independence of these commissions need to be
independence of these of the police, of the public service, have to be ensured. And I think we have to ensure that politicians don't have the authority to give directives on matter. They can decide on policy, but I think operational matters, their interference must be minimal.
So they can't be directing the chief accounting officer of a ministry, who happens to be the secretary to the ministry, to say, no, well, give that money to the Seal Ready Fund or whatever it is.
What I say is you must not allow politicians to give directions to officials, to politicize, to give political directions. You can give directions of, if it is, say, for the supply of fuel, some reasonable direction. I'm sure that is permitted under the Constitution. But when it comes to criminal investigations, I think we should not allow political directives to guide criminal investigations. That for us is whichever party is in power, that has to be the.
So that's devoid of politics.
Yes, so that we must build our law enforcement must be taken out of politics. It's not going to be easy, it's not going to happen overnight.
No, it won't.
It won't. But
It won't. Where does one draw the line? On the one side, you have, by and large, the peaceful protesters say, oh, come on, these were illegal, but they were minor misdemeanors. Then you have people who committed arson, right? So where do you draw the line?
so I think this is where in administrative law there is what is called the principle of proportionality.
Right.
So you need to investigate.
Yeah.
You need to investigate, and certainly matters relating to arson or any other serious act must be brought before there is no question that those must be investigated and people dealt with. But then of course you have the question of there is the principle of proportionality. When you are investigating, what is the you need to apply the principles of proportionality also, and take a call on that, and ultimately I think prosecutors, investigators will have to take a call.
So when you say we, I presume, of course, you're saying we as
Not
the people.
Not we. I say prosecutors and investigators.
Right. But isn't there a real need, as you see? Sri Lanka has, I suppose it owes a lot to this Aragale, the peaceful protesters, because they did make a difference. And so I suppose the wider message is that the voting public must again pay absolute attention to who they're electing at whenever the next election comes around.
Of course, for us, eternal vigilance is the price of our freedom. And I think it is very important that people are vigilant about their rights, about how they are being governed, and I think that is what was shown over a few months. I think never before have the people of this country been so vigilant about their rights. And I think that is absolutely positive, that people have taken it upon themselves to demand that their rights be safeguarded. And we have never had this amount of enthusiasm among people. We have never had this amount of interest among people. Of course, it is probably due to the economic factors also.
Yeah.
But I think I see that as a positive sign.
So really, Sri Lanka has, it's not the same as it was years ago. Sri Lanka has also evolved. Lifestyles have changed and so on, as somebody I know said. But whatever the case, whatever your lifestyle, whatever your circumstances, the bottom line is you can't let your country down.
Of course.
And one thing I want to ask you, I've been dying to ask this question, so I'll ask it. We say, our politicians, a lot of people say, one country, one law. But as we stand now, notwithstanding our discussion, it appears to me to be one country, several flaws. Is that true?
It is true. I think in terms of any country, you will have, there are flaws in any country, and I think it is upon us as citizens to see where those flaws are and to work towards change. And I think that is important, because come the next election, if our voters again go back to the traditional thinking, and if you continue to vote for people who are corrupt, if you continue to vote for people who have a reputation of bad governance, then I don't think you're going to come out of it. So I think ultimately it is in the hands of people, and I also think it is not only at election time. You must be active.
Must be constantly vigilant.
I think as citizens, we have to be vigilant at all times.
Saliya Peiris, President of the Bar Association Sri Lanka, President's Council. Thank you very much for your presence.
Thank you, Farhad.
We've much enjoyed you.
Thank you.
Thank you for all the questions, and let's wish you a very good evening. And as always, God bless you all.